Our goal is to be a bit like the offensive line on a football team. You shouldn't know our names. Everything should go perfectly. And likely the only time you know we exist is when something has broken down.
This is Real State, a podcast from CSG South. Join us as we talk with policymakers and public leaders shaping state-level decisions across the South and explore how ideas move from policy to real impact.
Good morning and welcome to Real State. I'm your host, Lindsey Gray. When most people picture a legislature, they imagine lawmakers debating bills under the dome, casting votes, and wrapping up when the session ends. But the truth is, state government doesn't pause when lawmakers go home. Across the South, and especially in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, legislatures are often made up of part-time elected officials, supported by highly skilled professional staff who keep the institution running year-round. Today's conversation goes behind the curtain of that reality. Because the Legislative Research Commission is one of those hidden engines of democracy, the kind of institution that everyday people rarely see, but one that is absolutely essential to how Kentucky's legislature functions. Today, we're joined by Jay Hartz, Executive Director of the Legislative Research Commission, the agency that provides the research, staffing, and operational backbone of the Kentucky General Assembly. I'm grateful you're here, Jay. Welcome to Real State.
Thank you for having me, Lindsey.
So let's jump in. Before we go into staffing challenges and modernization, I want to start with the big picture because some states are not set up like Kentucky, and most citizens may not even understand what an agency like the Legislative Research Commission does. Let's start there. What is the LRC and why is it so central to the functioning of Kentucky's legislature?
Well, Lindsey, I'll start off by saying, as a legislative staffer, I'm a little uncomfortable even having this conversation. Our goal is to be a bit like the offensive line on a football team. You shouldn't know our names. Everything should go perfectly. And likely the only time you know we exist is when something has broken down. But to your question, there are 138 members of the Kentucky General Assembly, 100 in the House, 38 in the Senate, and all of them are part-time, and they have lives, careers, families, interests that exist outside of their time spent as a legislator. So if you think about it, our session essentially runs from January through the middle of April. They're here all the time during that period. And then there are other times then they're not here a whole lot, or they may only be here in Frankfort once or twice a month. So that's why the Legislative Research Commission exists. We are the professional staff that are here every day in order to service the needs of the members and make sure that they're successful. If there's sort of a 1 and 1A in the conversation, the 1 would be members. The A would be the constituents that are coming to see them, particularly during session. So we spend a lot of time making sure that the guest experience is I don't know if we'd ever go with first class, but it's as good and useful as it can be. When you come visit your member of the Kentucky General Assembly, or go to a committee meeting because there's a bill that you're interested in, I always like to make sure that both members and constituents, I can't guarantee their success, but I can help make sure that they both have the tools that they need to accomplish what they need to accomplish while the General Assembly is in session.
Wonderful. I know they're thankful to have you all as that backbone and the behind the scenes wizard behind the curtain. So one thing that you pointed to, and we talk about often in the South, all of our legislatures are part-time. I'll put that in air quotes because we know how much work goes on for our legislators, even outside of session. But governing is also not part-time. So from your seat, what does the year-round work of the state legislature actually look like behind the scenes for your team when the legislators leave from session and you all are still working year-round?
So I often like to say that the LRC and its staff ultimately exists for 2 days. And it's really not even 2 complete days. It's from about 4 o'clock p.m. until 11:59 p.m. on the day before we go to veto recess and on the last legislative day. The 2 most beautiful mangled words in Latin that we use are sine die. That's not exactly how you would say sine die if we were in Latin class, but we say sine die. So ultimately we exist to make sure that on those 2 time-limited periods, the General Assembly has the ability to vote on all the bills that it needs to vote on in order to get to the governor for consideration of his ability to have to be able to act on those bills. But if you sort of think about the trail that leads members to be able to vote on, have to take knowledgeable votes, on those 2 evenings, we can't discount the meeting they had during what we describe as the interim, or those times when the General Assembly is not in session. The House and Senate combine to become interim joint committees, and they meet once a month. So it may have been something that was said during that interim joint committee that gives them what they need to be able to take an informed vote. It could be a meeting that they had with a constituent during the course of the summer that provides them what they need. It even could have been an email or a letter that their legislative assistant helped them deal with. So if you think about if the tip of the spear are those 2 evenings, if you go back that spear, the tip of the spear doesn't do any damage unless you have the leverage on the shaft of the spear. So we sort of have organized ourselves and exist so that members have what they need during those times that they absolutely have to have them.
To oversee all the professionals and supporting everything that you do, as you just walked through several things, but you also have professionals that are, bill drafting, to committee work, as you mentioned, to state budget oversight and just overall administrative operations. I mean, there's a lot of layers to what you do. So besides caffeine, what does it take to organizationally keep that running smoothly?
So there's about 350 full-time staff that work for the Kentucky General Assembly. That's closer to 500 when the General Assembly is in session. We have a lot of folks that are what we call General Session employees, or GA employees, that come to work with the clerks while we're in session. But 350 full-time employees, and we're sort of a soup to nuts kind of organization. We have a full-service library. We have a full-service print shop. If you need a document transported between your office and someone else's office to get a signature, we have couriers. It takes a lot of people to make this thing go. If you think about a normal legislative day, there's 138 members of the General Assembly. It's not unusual for us to have a couple thousand constituents joining us during the day. And I'm not good at math, but I know what geometric progression is. And if you just think about all the human interactions that are happening here during the course of the day, it would be foolish of me to think that I can keep up with that. So I have really smart people who work with me. I often say I'm fortunate they let me pretend like I'm their boss. But I have really smart, perceptive people who work here. So I have to trust them and provide them real clear guidance on what our standard operating procedures are. And I think the other answer to your question, I don't know if Lindsey will be able to see my visual aid, but I don't know if you will. But if you think this as a Venn diagram, generally we have two kinds of people that work here. The one side of the Venn diagram are creative people who wouldn't survive in a corporate environment but can show up to work on time. And the other is adrenaline addicts. And there's sort of usually an overlap between those two. I'm sure that I exist where those two Venn diagrams overlap, but we work under incredibly tight timelines that everything we do will ultimately end up in the statute books. So our failure rate essentially has to be zero. So tight deadlines, high accuracy, and so that's why I have really smart people that I have to trust to be able to do great things.
Well, I've had the pleasure of working with several of the people that you have mentioned, and it's always great working with your team, particularly on the Southern Legislative Conference, which we are preparing now in Kentucky later this summer. So you've talked about operational complexity, intensifying during session, fast pace, deadlines are real, public is watching. And on top of it, you'll have a Capitol renovation going on. So there's a lot of layers to all of that. I think asking you to walk through the day of legislative staff with the General Assembly is in full swing is probably a difficult thing to do. But if, unlike Congress, many state lawmakers have fewer staff. And so how does a central agency like LRC help ensure legislators can still serve constituents effectively?
So as I mentioned, there's 138 members of the General Assembly, and except for the Speaker and the Senate President, none of them have their own staff. So when they're elected and they come to Frankfurt, their presiding officer will assign them an office, but it's my responsibility to assign them a legislative assistant. And in many ways, LAs are sort of the hub around where a lot of members' interaction with staff, but the LA is their first point of contact for constituent communications, scheduling meetings with other members, constituents, lobbyists, keeping up with when their committee meetings are. So all members have an LA, many members share LAs. We have staff that are assigned to each one of the House and Senate standing committees. So if a member has an idea for a bill and they want to get a bill request, they would contact our Deputy Director for Committee and Staff Coordination and let her know what their bill request is, and then she goes through a process of identifying which committee of jurisdiction should draft that bill. The BR is then forward onto them, and then they contact the member and work directly with the member in order to get that bill drafted. Those staff are also the same staff that will be there when that committee is meeting. So they know how to run the committees, they know what's in the bills. So that sort of gets back to your unified staff question. Kentucky is unique in that we're the state in the country that has the most unified staff, which I guess is like most things in life, it's good and bad. But I think ultimately it has more benefits, has more virtues than it has vices. And that primary benefit is that when a member comes, we always sponsor, a good example of this is we always sponsor a new member orientation in December of even-numbered years. So we'll have a new member orientation this December. We don't have a lot of turf battles or pride of ownership in this organization since we're so focused on providing services to members. So you can ask anybody anything, and a member will ultimately get what they need from the person who is the boss of providing that service. I think a good example of that happened just recently. Had a special election. New member got sworn in the first day of session. We are in the process, it's installed, so I won't say we're installing, but we're in the process of perfecting a constituent relationship management tool that we're using. And the outgoing member consented to have all of their constituent information provided to the new member. So new member gets sworn in the first day of session, and that Friday of the first day of session, they were able to send out a legislative newsletter to 7,000 constituents in their district. So they weren't starting from absolutely nothing. They were starting from something. And that's our goal, is when we get new members that they should be worried about what bills they're going to introduce, what speeches they're going to make. That's why the people sent them to Frankfurt, was to do legislative business. They may be worried about how to decorate their office, but they shouldn't be worried about where their office is. Can their constituents find their office? Are they going to have stationery? All of the back end things that they don't have to worry about, we worry about, so that they can focus on what's really important and the reasons why they were elected.
Well, it sounds like your practices and your systems that you have in place to knowledge transfer and to make sure the legislators are set up for success are definitely some of the kind of secret sauce that we see that happens in Kentucky. But even with all of that, state legislators as well as staff are being asked to do even more every day with their time. And it leads to an important kind of point where often personnel or resources is limited, and we're faced with budget cuts or other just concerns that may be coming down the pipeline. So doing more with less is kind of typically the reality across state agencies. So from your perspective, what are the biggest operational realities facing legislative staff or state agencies just right now with some of those concerns, with that doing more with less?
Lindsey, I think there's a couple different answers to your question, but I'm going to choose this one, which is there's a inherent periods of forced consideration built into the legislative process. So what we're seeing from both members, the public, and media is more and more immediate access to information. So that's a lot of what we think through, is balancing the immediacy of something happening and the due diligence we need to make sure that what we're putting onto a website or sending out through social media is actually accurate. We have a document, it's both electronic and paper here in Kentucky. It's called the Legislative Record. It kind of looks like the paper version, looks like a newspaper because it's actually printed by a newspaper company. And you can go there and you can see everything that happened on the last legislative day, and it's also a bit of a historic record of everything that's happened to a bill since it's been introduced. So an example of that is committee meets, committee considers bills, committee might add amendments. In the last few years, one of our standard practices has been we will post a copy of the bills and amendments that were acted upon in a committee to that committee's website. It's a pretty short time frame from my perspective. It's probably not quick enough for other people's perspective, but we have built some time in for staff to be able to confer with each other and their notes to make sure that what's actually been put on the website is an accurate reflection of what happened in that committee that day. Lots of people like to talk about AI right now. Where AI fits into all of this, I'm sure that it does somehow. How it ultimately will, I think, is to be a bit sorted out.
So, Jay, you talked about the legislative record, and I'm sure that at times that can seem like a pretty great strain because y'all are getting it out there so quickly. And as you mentioned, balancing what happened in the day with confidentiality and all the things, but still trying to be really transparent and responsive to the constituents. So, besides the legislative record, what might be another strain that y'all are facing, whether it's staffing capacity? You mentioned technology with AI and some of those unknowns. Retention, I think, has come up in several of our states as maybe a key strain for them. Just what are you seeing in Kentucky?
So I think this is true not just in Kentucky. One of the strengths I see for being a part of CSG South is the Legislative Service Directors Group that CSG sponsors for us, and our ability to sit down with our peers. And oftentimes we talk about what's keeping us up at night as a way to have that conversation. And one of the things that is keeping us all up at night is, and they're sort of two sides of the same coin, which is talent attraction and talent retention. So if you think about the typical nonpartisan legislative staffer, even before you get to what their job is, you're looking for a pretty unique person. So if you're a nonpartisan staffer, you are agreeing that when you come to work every day, whatever political proclivities that you have, you will put them on a coat hook and leave them in your car. And when you're here during the workday, your primary focus is helping members of the General Assembly accomplish what they need to accomplish. So you may or may not agree with what you're doing, but you see the higher calling, the service in helping a member of the General Assembly serve their constituents. So that's pretty special. This is now my 27th year with the Kentucky General Assembly, and I haven't had an original thought in 27 years because my whole time here has been spent either helping Senate presidents or the members of the Legislative Research Commission solve the problems that they need to solve. So my name is never going to be in the newspaper as being the smart guy who figured out a problem. Because that's not my job. My job is to provide good, actionable information to decision makers so that they can make the decision and then go implement it. So, their willingness to be nonpartisan in what some people describe as an increasingly partisan world. The other is we work weird, crazy hours during certain parts of the year. When we're in session, this place is a 24-hour-a-day operation, working weird hours, long hours, knowing there will be parts of the year where you're relying on your spouse or partner to attend to important family duties. You're going to miss this time of year basketball games or concerts, or you won't be able to go to every single performance of whatever play or musical your kid is in. But once again, your family understands that what you're doing, there's a nobility to what you're doing, and you're willing to make that greater sacrifice for the institution. And the third one related to that is, I don't know if I've seen it in people that we're attempting to recruit to work at the Legislative Research Commission, and it may be the first two legs of this block them out, but it appears that Lindsey, people much younger than I am, probably the same age that you are, appear to maybe want something different out of their professional careers. I'm not quite sure what work-life balance is. That's likely a personal choice that people make. We're continuing to see people who are willing to work the hours with the understanding that what they're doing is ultimately pretty important.
And that was going to be my next thing. Let's kind of flip that question and those strains on its head. And what are the real advantages of building a career in state government, especially inside a legislature? I know you talked about nobility and what they're doing, and just really kind of servant's heart, just really in it for the public service of it all. And I imagine that's a characteristic that you look for in an interview process. I'm not even sure how y'all go about finding, those best and brightest with the characteristics that you're explaining. But what are those advantages, and maybe some tips for how you're finding those people?
Why do folks stick around? What I have found is, so there's about 350 people who work here. That's a lot for me, but if you look at the rest of state government, we're a very small agency compared to other parts of state government. We wouldn't even be a rounding error in Medicaid, so we're pretty small. But the great part about that is you get to know everyone you work with pretty well. And there are times of the year where you will spend more time with your coworkers here than you will with your family. And we really do develop close relationships with the folks that we work with, particularly when, as I mentioned before, high stress, tight deadlines, when you have folks that you can trust that they're going to do what they need to do so you can do what you need to do, and it's all going to be all right. Those tight-knit relationships, I think, are a lot of what keep people working for the Legislative Research Commission.
You have some great people working for you. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of them, very committed to what you all are doing in Kentucky, supporting the legislature, great attitudes. So just really solid people, as you're mentioning, and they stay around for a very long time. So you have a great group, and it shows. And the modern legislature isn't just managing staffing levels, as you just pointed out. It's balancing that experience, but also the evolution that comes along with just running the legislative institution, and heavily relying on that deep institutional knowledge and memory that those individuals that have been with you for a long time bring, but also responding to the rapid changes that we've already touched on today, like the technology or transparency or just the access, and just increasing that and making it faster. So in that modern legislative office, it's got to be powered by multiple generations of public servants working side by side. And this is something that LSA group talks about often as well, that you're a part of. And one of the real strengths of legislative staff agency is that you all bring together people with that knowledge, but you also make room for those newer professionals that are willing to get in there and roll up their sleeves and learn and train and be part of the state government. So from your perspective, what does each generation, and you don't have to go through all of them, but that you're seeing on your staff, that what does each generation bring to the table that especially is valuable for that modern legislative office?
So, I'm Gen X. You could either like me or dislike me because I'm Gen X. And millennials made a lot more sense to me. I was actually at a CSG South event, and the presenter that CSG South brought in pointed out that when millennials were asking why, it wasn't a challenging question. It was truly a sort of cultural orientation question. Why are you doing it? Meaning, explain to me why, what has gone into this thought process in order to get you to where you are. So it wasn't you're doing it wrong. It's why are you doing it that way? As a Gen X, I never would have asked that question of my boomer bosses. Things would have not gone well for me. You had to watch what they were doing and figure out from what they were doing, or just do what you were told and figure it out for yourself. Lindsey, I think a way things have changed, and I think for the better. The folks that we're getting at least are willing to show up to work on time and have good questions. And I think as their supervisor, you have to be willing to accept that question because in most instances it's coming from I want to understand why this organization or why you personally are doing in that way. And to sort of close the loop on why that's important for passing along institutional knowledge within the context of a legislature. Oftentimes we don't have a lot of flexibility on how we do things or why we're doing it, because it's either related to what's in the Constitution or in statute or in the House or Senate rules. So explaining to folks, we're doing it this way because there's a specific rule in the House or Senate that lays out this is the way that you have to do it. That's the standard, and in some instances, the standard is pretty prescriptive. So I think that the younger folks we're seeing who are more willing to ask questions sometimes force those of us who are maybe a little bit more along in their careers to be better at how we're passing along that information. I will say though, and if we imagine the Grandpa Simpson yelling at the clouds, my yelling at the cloud moment is I would encourage those younger folks to put their phones down. There's a world outside, whatever is happening on your phone. So put your phones down. I'm an old guy now, so IRL I think means in real life. Maybe live your life in real life a little bit more than what you are, and you might actually learn something.
I will wrap this up with IRL when we get to that point. But these staffing and operational challenges are found in every state. And regardless of size or politics or structure, you're all navigating kind of shared opportunities of how to modernize, how to retain talent, how to sustain sustain strong, trusted, effective institutions, because that really cannot be lost in all of this, whether it's modernization or generational changes. Remaining effective and trusted is kind of the backbone of state legislature. And without that, I think it has the potential of all falling apart. So one of the reasons CSG South exists is to obviously help states learn from each other. So what are some kind of best practices or shared practices, operational lessons that go across state lines that you've learned or you've been able to share with other states?
So people hate to talk about COVID. I don't like to talk about COVID. But when we were going through COVID, we were sharing information about what we were doing to try to react to what was going on at any particular moment. And for myself and my organization, I think that had two positive effects. It was, one, it proved that I wasn't the crazy person, that there were other people who were experiencing similar stresses. And it was also helpful to know that largely we were all arriving at similar solutions to those now bizarre questions that we were asking ourselves. So to be able to talk to my peers in other states, to know that similar things are keeping them up at night, and we will exchange documentation. Whether or not how much telework continues to be a conversation in amongst legislatures in the South. So being able to see how other states are handling their telework policies has been very helpful. So just to have people to talk to so that when you pop your head out of the gopher hole, you'll be able to go back down with some good actionable information that helps you be a better leader.
And before we close, I want to end with a question that really gets at leadership, because what you do requires not just management, but stewardship of the institution. So this is a signature question we're asking all of our guests, but what is the best piece of professional advice you've ever received that continues to shape the way you lead today?
So very early in my career in the Kentucky State Senate, my then boss was having a very public spat with the governor. And I was in a meeting where I was not yet an adult. So I would say the adults were having a discussion about what to do about that situation. And one of the name of one of the governor's staff came up, and I can neither confirm nor deny I said something disparaging about them. And the Senate president stopped the meeting and looked at me and said, he may or may not have said, I don't disagree with what you just said. But he went on to say, what I need you to understand is governors and Senate presidents, principal elected officials are going to say not nice things about each other in public. But as a staff person, you have a responsibility to maintain good working relationships with the governor's staff, because at some point we're going to stop fighting and we're going to have to work out a deal. And if the governor and I aren't talking to each other, that's one thing. If our staffs are unable to speak with each other, that's another. And that made a lot of sense to me then. It makes a lot of sense to me now. Having a basic level of professional respect for the people that you're ultimately going to have to deal with I think was a good lesson for me to learn at the time, and that advice has served me well over the course of my entire career.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal story with us as well. So Jay, thank you for your service, your leadership, and for giving us such a clear look into the real operational backbone of the Kentucky General Assembly. We're excited to host the 2026 Southern Legislative Conference with you and the Kentucky team this summer in Lexington.
The Southern Legislative Conference this year is in Lexington from July 11th to the 15th. And I would like to extend an invitation from myself to you to come to Lexington. It's going to be a great event. We're going to go to Keeneland. There will be bourbon, there will be music, and there will be great policy discussions. Lindsey's leadership with CSG South has created a staff organization called SAIL. If you're a legislative staffer and you're not involved in SAIL, you should be. They have some really great webinars coming up. So it's a way for you to be able to build your career and get to know people who do your job in other states. So as I said before, you're not the crazy one. So Lexington, July 11th through the 15th. Registration is open. I've already registered. So go to the CSG South website and register for the Southern Legislative Conference.
This conversation is such an important reminder. While legislators may serve part-time, democracy requires full-time support. And the people who staff our state legislatures are essential to making government work. And to our listeners, thank you for being part of Real State. More conversations like this are available at csgsouth.org. I'm Lindsey Gray. Let's keep it real.
Thank you for joining us today on Real State, where we keep it real about what really matters.